Well, good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à tous et à toutes. My name is Anne Conway. I am the director of the Museum of Work and Culture, which is located in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. And I want to thank you all for joining us this evening for this very special program. It's actually our first time that we co-present a program with the Boivin Center for French Studies and Culture at UMass Dartmouth. And I'm very excited about this. And I'm also very excited that tonight our guests on the panel are from a place that's very dear to my heart. I am also a Quebecoise, like many of our guests this evening, from Canada, and it's really nice to welcome you this evening. So thank you very much for being with us. Um, the Museum of Work and Culture tells the story of immigration. It tells the story of the people who left their farms of Quebec for the factories of Woonsocket, Rhode Island. They came to look for work, and we estimate that about 1 million people left the province of Quebec during the late 19th century and the earliest 20th century to come to New England and to other places, but many of them came to the city of Woonsocket. Actually, by 1920, the city of Woonsocket was considered to be the most French city in the US, with 70% of its population being French Canadian. And today, about 10 million Americans trace their ancestry to France and to French Canada. And we have our panelists with us this evening, Michael Eady, who is one of them. Michael is very proud of his heritage, and he is one of those proponents who, gets involved with the community and continues to spread his love and for his culture. And I think that we couldn't ask for a better moderator for this evening. Michael, I've known Michael for a long time because he's been coming to the museum to a lot of our events, and then he also serves on the board of the Rhode Island Historical Society, which the Museum of Art and Culture is a division of the Rhode Island Historical Society. I know that Morgan Greff, our executive director, is one of our in the audience this evening. And Michael wears many hats, and he's also on the board of the Boivin Center. And I know he worked very hard to put this program together this evening. So, Michael, thank you for all you've done, and I'll turn the program to you.
Well, merci Anne, et bonsoir à tous et toutes. Yes, I am a proud French-Canadian descent, the fourth generation here in Rhode Island. And my family comes from various places, including Tadoussac, Les Escoumins, places like that. I must say that everybody at the Boivin Center is very proud to be partnering with such an organization as the Museum of Working Culture, and of course CarbonConnect, which we'll find out more about tonight for this very special Earth Day program. The Boivin Center's mission is to act as a catalyst for interest in the French-speaking world, culture, technology through programs just like this. What I'm trying to get across is that the connections that the descendants of the Canadian French immigration from 100 years ago are still connected to the French-speaking world, and it's through situations like this that we can really make it happen. It's really easy in the United States to think of all the advancements in technology and commerce and environmental movements as something being solely in the realm of the English-speaking world. But you really only have to spend a little bit of time with someone like Jacques or Martin or Gaston to realize how really misguided that is. So just to set up a little bit, this webinar is scheduled to last approximately 1 hour, but we can go past that. And to ask a question, simply use the chat function on the bottom of the screen, and we'll go through the questions at the end of the panel. Tonight's speakers include my good friend Gaston Déry, a man of many accolades, a member of the Order of Canada for his contributions to biodiversity in the lower St. Lawrence estuary. Gaston is a strategic advisor, he's a speaker, he's a trainer in sustainable development, social responsibility, and biodiversity conservation. We have the highly esteemed Jacques Prescott. He is an internationally recognized specialist in the field of biodiversity, sustainable development, and governance. His list of accomplishments is very, very long, and I certainly couldn't go through them in the short time that we have here. But know that he is he's produced national biodiversity strategies. He's advised governments, UN agencies, and private organizations in sustainable development approaches. In fact, Jacques was the first one to teach me the expression développement durable, which apparently is a term that comes from Quebec for sustainable development. So it's lovely. Jacques is the Chief Sustainability and ESG Officer of CarbonConnect. His cousin, Martin Prescott, is the Chief Connecting Officer of CarbonConnect. He has spent the last 20 years becoming as an advocate and a market trader of cryptocurrencies. Martin works to promote the adoption of blockchain technology by raising awareness, being a social media animal, and just making it happen around the world. So it's a very exciting man to talk to. And then we have Brent Tolmie, who is the CEO of CarbonConnect. He's a fourth-generation logger in the Pacific Northwest. He knows what it takes to operate a successful international forestry business. He is also a huge blockchain proponent and a firm believer in decentralization of information as a solution to the world's transparency issues. So we're all very excited to hear what Brent has to say. So let's just hop right into it. Gaston will begin, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what Gaston has to say about his views on the importance of the forest for our quality of life and for the contribution of the forest to the challenge of climate change. Gaston?
Okay, thank you very much, and hello everyone. We are very, very happy and very excited to share this moment with you. You know, trees are our best allies, whether it's a located urban tree or our forest. They have been with us for millennia, silently but with great kindness. And they generate impact at several levels, which correspond to the three bubbles of the sustainable development. And I mean social, economic, and environmental. So if we look at the social aspect, a tree provides food for people and animals. And they make the air more breathable by reducing airborne dust. You know what? By planting trees and shrubs, noise pollution is reduced. And tree-lined streets are safer because they appear narrower and slow down the traffic. Trees beautify the landscape and hide less attractive aspects. And some studies show that taking a walk in the forest is a better calming agent than medication. And these studies have shown that hospital patients who can look at trees heal faster and suffer fewer complications than those who do not have access to this type of landscape. Trees provide health benefits such as stress reduction and speed up the recovery process. And tree brings us closer to nature and help to reconnect with culture. You know, my grandfather was always saying, get closer to the nature, she never lies. So tree helps to do so. If we look at the tree about the economy, trees provide shade in summer, reducing air conditioning costs. Conifers insulate homes in winter, reducing heating costs. Trees are sources of recreation and attract many, many, many tourists. Wooded properties generally have a higher real estate value. And trees provide employment in the forestry sector. Foresters, arborists, lumbers, researchers, forestry workers. Did you know that the survival of more than 125 municipalities in the province of Quebec is directly related to the forest. And if we look at the environment, trees planted in fields provide protection from wind and snow, helping protect crop. And the root system of tree helps preventing soil erosion, which in turn helps to prevent water pollution. A large tree can absorb up to 100 gallons of water from the soil and release it into the air in a day. Imagine, a large tree can provide a day of oxygen for up to four people. It takes about 500 mature trees to absorb the amount of carbon dioxide generated by an automobile traveling 20,000 kilometers a year. Tree provides shade, which cools the water, helping some species of fish because their branches and roots provide shelter from fish, for the fish from predators. And tree provides shade to asphalt surface in the cities, making streets and parking lots cooler and extending the life of the asphalt spaces. Tree function also as a storm and retention basin since they intercept the rain and reduce water runoff.
Hey, Gaston.
Yes.
Just a quick question. How are you making out with the your tree cover in the city of Quebec when they're trying to put that tram in? Are they really going to cut down all those beautiful trees?
Well, I think they were advised by the citizen that they want to protect the trees as much as they can. And in Quebec City, you have a very good urban forestry engineers working for the city. And, you know, Quebec City is the only modern city in North America not having an effective transport en commun. So you have, they were aware by the citizen to take care of the trees. Mm-hmm. And you know, that's, I have a friend in France who told me that the people were scared about the loss of the trees by this construction, but when they saw the positive impact of the construction, they understood that the price for this worth it. Mm-hmm. And I just want to finish to tell you an important things that will introduce my friend. You know, trees capture carbon and become carbon sinks that reduces greenhouse gases. You know, through its life, the tree has the capacity to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere using its stomata, which are small holes invisible to the naked eyes and located underside the leaves. It then transforms by separating carbon and oxygen. The carbon remains trapped in the roots, trunk, and branches, where it is used to create organic matters essential for tree growth. And the oxygen, in the other hand, is released into the atmosphere. Carbon sequestration is directly linked to photosynthesis. The more a tree does, the more efficiently it removes CO2 from the atmosphere. Listen, according to a study published in July 2019 in the journal Science, it would be possible to plant 900 million hectares of additional forests on Earth. Added to current forests, these trees would have the capacity to sequester 205 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, or a quarter of the carbon present in the atmosphere. It's amazing. And to finish my talk, I would like to tell you that, in my mind, of all the benefits that trees provide, their contribution to human well-being is probably the most important. Indeed, trees influence the morale and emotion of citizens, enhance the environment around them, and you know what? They provide a lot of pleasure. And it was also a pleasure for me to express within these few minutes the importance of the benefits of our best friends, the trees and the forest. Thank you.
Yeah, it really is a great message for Earth Day. You know, it's been great over these last couple of weeks planning this with the four of you, and I've learned so much. And so we have Mr. Prescott, Mr. Jacques Prescott here tonight, and it's amazing to me how one province of Canada can have so many people that have brought so much to the environmentalist movement, to the biodiversity movement. And I just love to hear Jacques' take on why that may be and who we should be knowing about.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation. First of all, I'd like to mention that my adventure with biodiversity and sustainable development began in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, where my father was born in 1928. So it's a nice way today on this Earth Day to mention that and to tell you that about some of my friends and colleagues that, in my opinion, have really truly contributed to changing our views of the world. And of course, being Canadian, they are my fellow Canadian and Quebecers. And the first one I'd like to mention is my dear friend, Professor Pierre Dansereau, who sadly passed away 100 years old in 2011. But as a professor at U of Michigan, he produced a book in 1957 called Biogeography and Ecological Perspective. And that book described for the first time the escalating impact of human activities on the global environment. And he demonstrated that us human beings are governed by the natural laws that regulate the biosphere. So this major output from this gentleman is made him to be considered by us Quebecers as the father of ecology in our own province. And he finished his career in UQAM at the Institute of the Environment that currently bears the name of Pierre Dansereau Institute for the Environment. Another one that I had the pleasure to meet a couple of times is Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong is a famous Canadian businessman. He was CEO of Hydro Ontario at some point. He was CEO of Power Corporation, but mostly known by as an Undersecretary General for the United Nations. And he organized in 1972 in Stockholm the first United Nations Summit on the Environment, which led to the creation of environmental departments all over the world. Like the Quebec Department of Environment was created just after that World Summit on the Environment. He's also the organizer of the Rio Summit, the famous Rio Summit on Sustainable Development in 1992. And so these famous summits were the basis of the general involvement of all heads of states around the world for the environmental movement. Another one that is dear to my heart is the former director of the Canadian Wildlife Service, David Munro. At the time where he was the Director General of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, in the IUCN, in 1976 to 1981, he led the publication of what we call the Global Conservation Strategy, the first world conservation strategy that dealt with biodiversity conservation in a sustainable development perspective. And that strategy was updated a year before the Rio Summit in 1991, 1 year before the summit that occurred in 1992. And that document, that strategy that David Munro co-authored with others, is clearly the basis of what we know as the Agenda 21 that was adopted by United Nations at the Rio Summit. Another one that is probably less known, but very influential in Quebec, at least, is Michel Jourdain. He's a French-born person who worked for Environment Canada, and he worked for other organizations as well. But the year of his death, sadly, he published a major book called the Défi écologiste, the Environmental Challenge, and that major book sets in 1984. Can you imagine that? It's years before the Rio Summit. And this guy, he proposed a responsible development strategy that engages the whole of society. And that book, I use it regularly, and I mentioned that book in a recent paper I published in the World Finance report. And another one that is interesting to me is Jim McNeill. He was the Secretary General of the World Commission of Environment and Development, the Ottawa-born citizen. So he's the writer of the Brundtland Commission report. And that the Brundtland Commission report, it gives the nobility to the concept of sustainable development. And this set the stage really for the Rio Summit, along with the document that I earlier mentioned, published by David Munro. Another guy from Montreal this time is Peter Jacobs. Peter Jacobs is well and living in Montreal. He's an emeritus professor, faculty of planning, School of Urban Planning in Montreal University. And with his colleague Barry Sadler, he's from BC. Barry Sadler is from BC. These are the co-authors of the famous three circle representation of the sustainable development concept: economy, society, environment. And these graphic representation really set the stage for a comprehension of the importance of bringing together all the dimensions of development.
So that comes from Quebec.
This guy is from
Who knew?
Montreal, my university, and
I would think that this is a small circle. Have you known these people for the last 25, 30 years?
Oh yeah, I've met all of them, and I know them.
Yeah.
And Barry Sadler, the co-author of this famous representation, is from BC. So
Right.
for this year, working with BC people, we tend to look back at these things as well.
Just curious, the Rio Summit was so long ago. Is it still? Is it still significant?
It's very significant because it set the stage for the first global strategy for sustainable development.
Okay.
Action 21, what we call, and we adopted also the Rio principles, sustainable development principles that are behind most of the current legislations related to sustainable development in several countries. And the Rio Summit was mirrored afterwards. Every 10 years, we have a major United Nations Summit on the environment. First in Stockholm, then we had one in Nairobi, and then one in Rio, the famous one. And then we went to Johannesburg in 2002, and eventually 2012, we had the second Rio Summit where everybody decided to really push forward the agenda for adopting a sustainable development strategy in each nation of the world. And the famous Brundtland report is the result that was published in 1987 that developed the notion of sustainable development. It solo was translated by, with the help of the financing from the Quebec government, translated in French by two of my good friends, Harvey Mead and Luc Gagnon, who's prominent ecologists in Quebec. Harvey Mead was the first commissioner for sustainable development for the government of Quebec, and Luc is a prominent ecologist teaching sustainability and energy issues in different places.
You're like a library unto yourself.
Yeah, well, I've been part of that movement for many years. So, that's one example I'd like to mention. In 1985, we had the Jakarta Summit on Biodiversity.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And in Jakarta, this is where the United Nations selected the location of the Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And we had 5 5 cities trying to gain that, to win the Secretariat. And Montreal was one of them. So with my good friend from the mayor's office in Montreal, we organized set up a campaign, very proactive campaign during this Jacques summit. And we finally ended winning the bet. And eventually Montreal became known as now the world capital of biodiversity, because we host the secretary of this famous UN convention. And a year after, that was 1996, the Quebec government itself, like following on this, the fact that the secretary was in Montreal, we adopted in Quebec a strategy for biodiversity. And the provincial strategy for biodiversity is based on a framework that a good friend of mine developed, and Benoit Gauthier from the Department of the Environment in Quebec. And both Benoit and I, we presented that framework to a world conference in Montreal. That another thing that I helped organize at that time. And that was the first global conference that the IUCN would open to the public. That was in Montreal, the World Conservation Summit. And so we presented our framework and the impact we had on the Quebec administration with our strategy on biodiversity. And soon enough, all the UN agency came to us and asked us to work, use that framework. And this is how started my work around the world to help the governments prepare different strategies, sustainable development strategies and biodiversity strategy based on that framework.
So it must be quite a shadow for Martin to kind of come out of in the family, right?
Not at all, because you will see that Martin has a lot to contribute to in his sector. I tell you, I envy him sometimes. And 2006, that's another story here. In 2006, the government of Quebec adopted a strategy, a framework for sustainable development. That was the framework is a legislation, strategy, and action plan. And 6 years before that, the sustainability file within the government was fading down, really fading down. They didn't know what to do about it. And I suggested my boss at the Department of the Environment to give me the file. So I took the file and took care of it and built the framework with colleagues. And eventually we came up with Minister Mulcair at the time, Tom Mulcair. We came up with a legislation on sustainability that I presented later on in different international events, the United Nations in New York City, and also in Stockholm. And what happened is that this framework and legislation led us to produce a guidebook for the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. It's a guidebook how to develop a sustainable development strategy, and that was published by them later on. And finally, the last person I'd like to mention is my very good friend, Boivin, who is a chief advisor, I would say, expert advisor to CarbonConnect, to our new corporation, our enterprise. And Claude is a biologist, but he's the founder of what we call the chair of Eco Council, a chair en Eco Conseil of University du Québec in Chicoutimi. And he's a founding director as well of a major research program called Carbon Boreal, and he's an expert in climate change. He published books that you might have seen and articles on the subject. And Claude has got regular columns in the newspaper in Quebec, and he's a very influential person. And he certainly is also a lead author of a major work on forest and its relation to the communities. That was published for the United Nations also in 2012, I think. And I had the pleasure a year after that to present that in a major forest conference in Istanbul. But Claude, the other thing that I would like to mention, he's a lead author also of a report on the governance of sustainable development in the different 55 administrations of the different 55 members of the Francophonie. So what we did, I was co-author of that report, and we surveyed and talked to all the governments of the Francophonie world, and we compiled an information on how they manage sustainable development, and we came up with a number of recommendations that I presented afterwards at the Rio Summit in 2012. So Claude's work is extremely influential, and I'd like to pay homage to him tonight because he's been very, very helpful and still is very active in this field. And finally, even though I mentioned, you see, the old timers, I would say something that is important to mention is that following on the footsteps of us all, the senior predecessors, I would say, there's a number of very good younger experts that are coming up and bringing their contribution to the field of sustainable development and biodiversity. And some of them you probably have heard of. Laure Varidel, for example, who's an expert in equitable production. Jérôme Dubras, who is the environmental economist. Danielle Normandin, who's an expert in circular economy. Catherine Boivin from U of McGill. She's a climate change and tropical expert. And a good friend of mine, Sofiane Baba, is an Algerian-born person who's a U of Sherbrooke. He just published a book on sustainable management. So these are some examples of experts, I would say, that are keeping the flamme very burning very strongly, and they're bringing to the planet the best that we can offer. And I'm sure that we can find examples all over the world in all jurisdictions of people like that who are committed to make a difference in this world.
Well, I'll tell you, Jacques, you've turned on all my buttons, my history geek buttons, my linguistic buttons, environmental buttons. It's everything. I'm thrilled. I'm just thrilled about this whole thing. I've been talking to you for weeks.
Yes, I have a quote here from the famous anthropologist Margaret Mead, and she said, "Never doubt that a small group of determined people can change the world." And this is a famous quote that I think that all of us must use and think about, and knowing that we can all make a difference.
It's huge. It's such a great message for Earth Day, and you know, we keep talking about diversity, biodiversity, and how it makes an ecosystem stronger. You know, there's so many ways in which diversity makes any system stronger. Diversity of thought, a good conversation with people who you don't agree with and come across things in a different way. And for me, I'm always excited to speak with people from different countries with who speak a different language and just come across thoughts in a different way. You know, I think everybody has a certain way of coming across problems. And one of the things that I was hoping that Martin would explain to me is, what is a French Canadian doing in British Columbia? You know, I've seen you on YouTube in Switzerland and across Europe, and you know, it all seems to make sense. Now, I'm sure British Columbia is beautiful, so that probably makes sense there. And I hear the mountain biking is amazing, but I'd love to hear. What is all this talk about diversity within a corporation, a global corporation, and how does that fit into the whole CarbonConnect story? Talk to me, Martin.
There you go. So thank you very much again for the opportunity tonight. I'm very, very pleased to be here. On a personal note, I have two passions. The first one is technology. The second one is mountain biking, or it goes, you know, ça peut aller des deux côtés. It can goes both ways. So I've been, the in-house blockchain expert for CarbonConnect since the beginning. I'm a very fortunate founder, the same way as Brent is. We have another partner, which is not with us today. His name is Tim Galtz. He's our Chief Strategist Officer. And of course, Jacques. So just a little story to answer your question. The funny part is that being involved in technology with artificial intelligence, blockchain technology and such for many years, my friend, Tim Galtz, which are our Chief Strategy Officer, we got involved actually with artificial intelligence software. And when we saw the first demo with this thing, it was unbelievable how much granular we could get data from forest. And we saw a beautiful opportunity about the new technology being implemented in the forestry world, but myself and Tim were by far not specialists into the forest. I like being in the forest. I like, being in the outdoor. I value it a lot, as many people, I guess, but I had no clue about the economy related to it. So fortunately, we had a friend in common who said, hey, I have a friend of mine. He's a fourth generation logger. He's an expert, in the forestry field, and he might have interest into the technology you can provide. So that's the first day actually that we met with Brent, our CEO now, which is with us today. And the funny part is that the minute that we showed that AI software to Brent, the first thing who came and he's going to share it himself, but the first thing who came into his mind is that this thing will blow away everybody in the forest industry's mind, because it brings for the first time the capacity to monetize the value of what the forest does. And the forest, when we all hear about climate change for so many years now, and we see now governments all around the world want to implement new politics around it, well, it will increase the value of what I call the lungs of the world, because the forest is one of the key player as itself being, important for us to be able to breathe fresh air. So we got involved with Brent. And of course, on one end, you will understand as a potential business, we had the research with our strategist officer, we had the tech with the blockchain expertise that I could bring in the AI software, and we have now the experience coming from the forest industry and the indigenous community contacts and everything of what Brent could provide. But one very important key was missing to our future success. We had no science base, we had no scientists, to value and validate what we are trying to accomplish at the time. So I had a thought, and I know Brent is laughing right now, because that was honestly one of the most amazing moments in our very early stage, as a company. I had a kind of a, how do you say that in English? Epiphany or epiphany or
an epiphany, certainly. Yeah, an epiphany. Yeah.
So, and I said, I think my cousin is a biologist and he might help. And the first thing first is that Brent, Tim, and I, especially Brent, because we barely knew each other at the moment. It was not like a strong relationship. So he said, yeah, of course, everybody has a cousin like Eddie in National Lampoon with Chevy Chase, right? So the funny part is I went on LinkedIn, I looked at Jacques' profile, and I think that what you heard from him, for 10, 15 minutes, well, you see that in your own personal family, you have a guy who wrote, policies for biodiversity for many countries in the world, being involved in the carbon sequestration markets for years, knowing about the environment better than anyone, connected to all of this community of French-speaking, Canadians which are actually pioneers in what we are doing. I was just blown away, right? And so I remember the day that for the first time I got in touch with Jacques. We had a conversation. He found our project to be interesting at first, you know, and being a potential real important legacy for himself as an individual, but also because he's so passionate about the environment. And so when we had our first introduction call, Tim, Brent, I, and Jacques in the first place, and Jacques was just, you know, like going down the path of explaining of all of everything of what he's done. It became so obvious that we had a potential amazing success story, not only as a company, but really, you know, how we can change the world one tree at the time. So from there, we realized that what we were bringing, you know, to the world, it was actually the potential as well to create value for people which are in need. And we're talking here about the indigenous communities all around the world, but especially in Canada, because this is where that our company is having most of the success already. And it's all based in British Columbia and Quebec as well. Because again, of our two different Canadian, French and English cultures mixing in between the team of CarbonConnect, right? Having some people from Quebec, being French myself, French speaking, same way as Jacques, and having the other guys, which brings experience from British Columbia. So convergence by definition is people coming together and uniting around a common goal and share focus, right? That's what it means.
So single-handedly, you're like reuniting Canada, right? You're like Pierre Trudeau's dream. You're making it all happen. It's lovely. But that's the strength of Canada, right? Because you have that diversity. Through diversity, you have the strength.
Absolutely. And of course, we have major assets, and one of them is forest, right? And so Canada as a country and the indigenous communities who kind of are beneficial of these assets, well, we actually have a big chunk of the lung of the world, the same way as Russia does, and many other countries do have tons of forests. We have plenty, and you're no different in United States as well. You've got tons of forest down where I live, Vermont, of course, Washington states, and you've got some in Oregon as well, where you've got a lot of forest harvesting, biomass happening. And of course, I will allow Brent in a few minutes to explain how our business model will change the entire forest industry and the world economy around it. But it was very important for Jacques and all of the other experts, which are part of our advisory group, that if we come with a business model, it has to comply with the sustainable goals of United Nations, which has been voted, you know, from the most important countries of the world. And when Brent brought the fact that we could actually connect the indigenous communities into our project, meaning that major emitters all around the world, which are companies, you know, in the world of capitalism, and of course bringing, you know, every goods and every services that everybody is consuming on the day-to-day basis. Well, we had the chance actually to take some of these guys' profits and give back, because it's not just about taking, it's about giving back, right? And I think that everybody shared that kind of value. And by connecting actually pollution and being able to develop a business model where most of our revenues goes back actually to the indigenous communities, which many of them don't even have clear water or have taps in their own house to have access to it. Well, we could create actually a new world with a new economy attached to bringing some trust because of the blockchain technology. And if most of you guys which are with us today don't know about that technology, I really suggest that you get educated about it, because it's going to change the entire world as we know it. The same way as the internet changed our world for the last 25 years, blockchain will be the extra layer of, because it brings a decentralized world where all the data is transparent and we cannot lie about it. When all the data are collected and put into a ledger, which everybody can see, it brings the trust which is missing in many different aspects of our lives. We can see that now there's less and less, trust in between governments, in between different kind of entities all around the world. Corruption has been exposed in many different ways for years. And now the blockchain technology have the capacity to bring back that trust without no doubt and certification that the information is true. So what is true, Michael? Yeah.
Okay, so we've got two big things going on here. We're talking about forests, protecting the forests, keeping them going, and then we're talking about blockchain. We're talking about currency. It's like I'm there. How does it put together? Is this what Brent's gonna do? He's gonna like pull it all together and explain how this is gonna work, or can you tell me in like 30 seconds or less?
I will.
Just kidding.
My goal today was to set the table for
Certainly, yeah.
Brent to talk about his own experience, because at the end of the day, he's the guy who works boots on the ground with the foresters and of course with the indigenous communities. But just at least to say that what I'm the most excited about all of this is that trust is a very important component in businesses, right? And it's also a very important component in relationships. And this is where that, even if today, one of the component was talking about culture, it's very important that everybody with different beliefs or different opinions, we can rely on, trust in between us, trust in between buyers and sellers in different markets, so we can keep on pushing forward for a new economy model. And so this is why I'm very excited to be part of CarbonConnect, because we know for a fact that we're going to change the way that we're going to value forests, and that's such forever. So on that word, the man is there.
All right, Brent, just a quick question. So you're the
Certainly.
fourth generation forester.
Yes.
Does that mean you cut down trees?
Yes.
Oh, so you're the bad guy.
Yes.
That can't be so. Why don't you explain?
Sure. So I was born into a logging family, but we understood right away that there was a benefit to living the lifestyle that we did, and we also understood very quickly that sustainable forestry was something that we could practice. And I learned that lesson at a young age, in that I was fortunate enough to harvest an area where my grandfather had logged, and that made an impression on me as a young man, thinking that, well, here now we're harvesting a tree again for a second time. And my uncle actually pointed out to me, well, actually that's the fourth time. So, and this could probably be harvested twice again in your lifetime. And so I started thinking about the forest differently at that moment. And we were fortunate enough as a family to buy an allotment of timber that we were to manage through the whole spectrum of logging and marketing, and seeing those boards cut into lumber that we all need for our lives, but also the silviculture aspect, so the reforestation. And it's this concept of I'm not going to butcher it en français, but la vie dans le bois, which is life in the woods. And that's something that really occurred to me as a young individual, learning the family trade. And as I grew up and took on projects outside of the family and got involved in renewable energy, hydroelectric energy, specifically in British Columbia, it occurred to me that there is a new economy and that it's developing, and that also we have an accounting problem essentially in the world. So we have too much emissions, and we need to sequester that. So we need to balance out that equation. And when I met Martin and when I met Tim, and of course, Martin suggested he had a cousin, and we didn't know it would be I mean, amazing. And we're so honored to have Jacques on our team. He introduced us to people like Gaston and yourselves, and we're just so honored to be playing a small part. But the learning that has taken place on our side has been incredible. And it occurred to us that the best solution to balance out this carbon deficit that we have in the world are trees. And the fact is that forests used to dominate the landscape, and we've made way for cities, we've made way for food production. But it occurs to us that the concept of forest management is a bit broken, and that where trees could be replanted and restocked, it's just not happening at scale. And so that's where we felt that we could get involved to sell a high quality offset to industries that we need. So we all function around petrochemicals, we all function around hydrocarbons as a source of fuel. We just need to balance out of that equation and really get more trees back into productive growing cycles and actively manage the forest. And so we started dreaming about how we could do that, and how do you change the world? Well, you pick up a shovel and plant a tree, and we do believe that. How do you address the problem that we've created now? You engage experts like Jacques Prescott and Gaston Déry, and you invite them into your process to say, how can we learn about sustainability from people who literally invented the term? And so we think of ourselves as a 6+7+17 company. And what that means is Jacques' model, the 6 lenses of sustainability. Can we weigh all our decision making through those? 7, which is 7 generations thinking, which is what we borrowed from our Indigenous partners. Thinking about, if we're doing something today, what does that mean 140, 200 years from now in terms of the life cycle of the forest, just to get out of that short-term commoditization of the forest and get into very long-term thinking. Talking about cutting down trees for a tramway. Is that a good decision now? Is that a good decision 5 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now? So getting out of that short-term thinking.
Something that we could learn from the Chinese, right? Thinking beyond the next 5 years, beyond the next 10 years. It's a very hopeful thought.
And that's really what occurred to us. And then 17, of course, is the Sustainability Development Goals that were adopted by the UN in 2015. And we just think they're important as far as a decision-making framework. So everything we're thinking about and doing. And then, of course, we're from the new school, so we've adopted the old school. And then from the new school, we've taken things like AI that can teach us, and we can aggregate data around what's going on with our forests, because they're so vast. In order to protect these things, in order to avoid the tragedies of Australia and California, and Fort McMurray, closer to where I live, how do we actually step in and prevent these carbon releases when things were very preventable from a scientific perspective? And how do we avoid these mass carbon events and instead get more trees back in the ground, manage the forest actively, and try to balance that equation? So we have that deficit, let's bring it into check. And that way we're not judging industries that we rely on. We're not building transition plans that are based in hopes and dreams, but very practically. In my day job, I work in an accounting firm, so very proud to work with M&P, and we spend a lot of time balancing credits with liabilities, and that's our goal here, is that we have a liability, we have an asset, so let's get that matched. And
CarbonConnect is actually monitoring the forest with technology, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So we've adopted a bunch of technologies that we got excited
like
about.
Radar or something, right?
LiDAR. So
LiDAR, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so shooting lasers at the ground that actually do measurements, and then that information is collected, and we put that back into, and our goal really is to develop a dynamic, typified model of the forest so that we can see what the forest is doing, so that we can prevent those events that cause forest tragedy and actually impact to biodiversity, to plant and wildlife habitat. We're just having a conversation today about the impacts in Jasper National Park and how the ungulate population is dying off because of the dead and dying trees. And that there is a new economic way, a formula forward. It's just that we need to be longer term in our thinking, and we really need to work with the companies that are emitting carbon at scale and get them into the business of good active forestry and teaching them how to do things differently and more sustainably. And that's
so this is more than making the forest, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I pick up the reference, but in a way, you know, where President Trump failed, he got that right. He actually understood that good forest management isn't laws and regulations, but it's actively managing the forest. That means you have to be there. And when we talk about the millions of acres and hectares of forests, you know, from Washington State and up in British Columbia where I live, through to Saskatoon where I am now, right through the forests of Quebec and Northern Ontario and out to the East Coast, and then down into places like Maine and Vermont and our border states that we share so much heritage with. It's about actively managing those forests. And that just doesn't mean regulations. It means being there to make a difference.
It's really empowering the people that live there to play a bigger role in their own forest. I mean, that's another diversity lesson. It's a very exciting and hopeful story.
It is, and we're so happy to play a part of it, and asking companies that emit carbon to pay a tax in the form of a carbon credit, so that we can put that money back into communities, back into creating sustainability, and back into a new form of economy is where we've built our model. And
so that's the connection, right? It's the
mhm.
it's the carbon trading using the Bitcoin or the different cryptocurrencies.
We don't, we're not crypto per se. We're using the decentralized model, which is similar. So Bitcoin is based on a decentralized platform. And what that means is that no one can manipulate the ledger. So this is an immutable ledger. So the problem with some carbon credits is that they lack transparency. So I bought an offset in Brazil. ProPublica went back and investigated. That forest had been taken out. So you spent money thinking that you're doing something good for the planet and sequestering carbon, and it was gone. And there was no one there to actively police that. So we believe in enabling everything we sell on the blockchain. So there's a responsibility. And of course, that goes back into the active monitoring.
That's
so that
truly helpful.
Absolutely.
That's truly helpful. That's what we need. Yes.
And our goal, and this is the dream, is to deliver a dashboard where someone who buys a sequestration unit from us, from CarbonConnect, will be able to actually look at their area and see some real-time information of what's going on in the forest. And that
I was wondering, do you think it'd be possible to actually, as an individual, pay to offset their own carbon footprint?
Absolutely.
Is that ridiculous?
No.
If I may, Brent, first, it already exists. If you look at one of the initiatives in Quebec by Carbone Boréal, this is what the people can do, actually. So if you're flying an airplane round trip for a specific amount of mileage, it quantifies actually how much emission that you created, as an individual, and you can give your credit card, you pay actually to offset your pollution, and they plant trees.
See, I'm another liberal looking to pay taxes, but it would seem to make sense that if I'm going to fly to California for 5 hours, maybe a certain amount of that money should go towards a carbon offset.
Well,
what I wanted high quality to offset. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
So what I wanted to highlight regarding what Brent was saying is that it's a mindset which has to change. Like going back to the tramway that they want and plan to build in Quebec. Of course, they're going to cut some trees, to put the railway there and such. But okay, you're going to create some pollution. How can we offset this? And this is where the mindset has to change. It means that maybe you can plant trees. You can find an area which needs, to be actively managed for many different reasons. And this is the way that we have to educate people to change their mindset in the first place and just make it sustainable.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, it's terrible. As much as I do care about this, I do love my gas-powered automobile. I love my stick shift, and I don't know what I hope to transition to an electric car in 5 years, but not too soon because I love my Audi. So, this is all very, very hopeful.
Well, it is, Michael, and I think the key learning there is that there's a carbon accounting that needs to happen in all of our lives. We need to understand what we are emitting over and above what we can sequester, and if we can balance out that equation, then some of these transition periods that we're stuck in now, where we're hopeful about a future there that looks like the Jetsons with bubble emissions coming out the tailpipe and robot maids named Rosie. And we can all appreciate that that's coming at some point in time. But we need to bridge the gap now. And of course, the climate is at crisis, and we need large scale solutions to the issue. And that's really where we step in. So we're concerned at what we're doing at an individual level, but we're also working on massive forest projects because we know the world is at crisis right now and we need to address those things.
Well, it's good that somebody notices because it is a crisis, and what we do need to breathe. It seems like we're all taking this very lackadaisical.
It's true, and you know, unlike some people who are trying to colonize Mars, we think the planet we live on is pretty good, and we should pull up our socks and work locally at home first, rather than, you know, trying to colonize space as a jettison to Earth type thing. So,
Exactly.
and that's not a dig on Mr. Musk. We you know, we like his technology and all that stuff, but we are concerned about the planet, and you know, the wildfire season's coming up across Canada, the United States, and it's about controlling our actions and being thoughtful, and again, just long-term thinking.
Excellent. I would love to ask people to put in questions into the chat.
Michael, if I may just say
Go ahead,
something.
Gaston, please.
Okay. The thing interesting in that, I'm involved with forest protection for 20 years. And when we were talking about forest protection, the image that we saw is that we decided to not have revenues with the forest. But with this approach that you protect the forest, and then the forest works for you to sequester carbon, and then you can transform this in a stock exchange. It means that if you protect your forest, you can have a revenue by protecting the forest. So it's a new way of seeing the impact of the forest protection. That's important for the business people. And the thing which is very interesting is that you have in the States the Time magazine, and the first page of the Time magazine is related directly to the climate change that we have to take care of. And today on Earth Day, we have this webinar related exactly with the front page of the Time magazine. So there is presently through the planet a wave of people who wants to identify what do we do to face off this planet changing, and with this technology and this new approach, it's a tool that gives us hope. That was my comment.
Excellent.
And Michael, I wish I can add something if you guys don't mind, because again, when, you know, a few minutes ago, I said how important it is, you know, to change our mindset as individuals, but as a collective as well. And I think it's very important to highlight actually what we are doing, because if you look at our business model, and I suggest people to go visit our website to have, you know, more clarity about our company. You can go visit CarbonConnect, all one word, .io. I've put the link actually on the chat. But 50% of our revenues go straight back to the beneficial forest owners, meaning like the first partners we have are indigenous communities. So 50% of the revenues goes back to these communities for their own benefit. 20% of the revenues goes back into active managements, which you understand creates jobs actually to these indigenous communities. And it's a give back straight to the environment. So we keep 30%, you know, to develop the technology and provide all of the forest services and data collection and all of these things, which they're not cheap. But at the end of the day, 70% of all the revenues coming from the market prices, which at the time we speak, we have to tell, you know, the people which are here as attendees that we're already talking about on the world market in Europe right now, it's 45 euros, which emitters are paying for a metric ton of carbon sequestered. Meaning that we're talking already about what, $50 US or $55 US a metric ton per hectare. And you understand that we can bring value with 50% of these CSUs sold, which we call carbon sequestration units. They go back to the indigenous and 20% goes back to the environment. This is a model which will change actually the mindset, the way that we are looking for.
I think it's brilliant. You know, we all get excited to hear about these carbon offsets or, you know, all these trees that are being planted until you start to really scratch the surface and find out that there's just monoculture, just the same tree being planted, you know, over and over and over again, which doesn't make an environment. Or, you know, as Brent was saying, sure, somebody you know, somebody paid for a carbon offset, but the forest was actually gone long ago. So Jacques, I understand what Brent does. I understand what Martin does. When I think of biodiversity, I think of animals. I think of plants. What do you do during the day?
Well, first of all, my role in the company is making sure that we comply with all the requirements related to sustainability. We talked about the 6 dimensions model. So we ensure that, for example, our governance, our relations to culture, our relation to the environment, our relation to economy and to social issues are exemplary. And my job is using management tools that we developed at the University of Quebec in Chicoutimi. I'm using an analytical grid that help us to identify the strengths and weaknesses of our approach in regards to the 6 dimensions I mentioned. And what's interesting here is that the whole CarbonConnect approach to forest management is nature-based. That means that we want to use the best lessons from nature to ensure that to improve the capacity of the forest to capture carbon, CO2, and also to provide food and shelter, not only to animal life and plant life, but also to the indigenous people to sustain their traditional way of life. And I'd like to mention here the importance that we pay to the needs and the expectations of the First Nations in Canada, especially in the land base that we are talking about in British Columbia. We pay very much attention to their needs and requests, and making sure that all what we'll be doing in the field will be done with their contribution, with their participation, with their consentment. And it is very, very important that we listen to the experience and traditional knowledge that these people have, and we have to pay homage to that, because if some of the forests in Canada are still pristine, it's certainly because of their contribution to that and the way that they managing their environment and protecting it, and I would say using it sustainably is something that we can learn a lot from.
That's wonderful. Just one last question before we go. Excellent question. I guess we should, Brent, I guess you're the suit, right? You're the man. So the big question is, when do you expect to be operational? One of the attendees asked. Is there a threshold of large-scale polluters paying for offsets by volume that you need to get started, or is it a scalable from a small base growing by the number of acres? How does this work? When does it all get going, or has it already started?
Sure. So we're involved in a pilot project, and we'll be starting our data analytics this summer. So, and that actually represents an area of 1.8 million hectares. So we're definitely not small, but our goal is to act as small and local as possible using advanced data analytics. And so we're ironing out our process over a big area so that we can be quick and nimble to actively manage smaller areas. And really the key, I think, is if there are smaller areas, it's just about being thoughtful, but certainly we're open to providing forest analytics, and our goal is to be global. So we're talking to forest owners right from South America through to Kazakhstan, in Russia, across the African continent, as well as North America. And we're really excited to be working with an Indigenous partner in the north of Canada. And part of it is regulatory. So of course we have to cooperate with our governments and jurisdiction, and they're curious about this whole carbon business and the fact that it's a $300 billion plus global industry now. And of course the most advanced schemes are actually in Quebec with a cap and trade market that is tied to the Californian market, as well as in the Eurozone, where they're trading credits on a daily basis. And when we talk about a ton of carbon, there's millions that move every day on the Euro market, and there's auctions that happen across the globe. So, and the price is all over the map in terms of the cost of a credit. And credits aren't just natural climate solutions. That's where we're focused. But there are, if we have a hydrocarbon-based bus fleet and we convert those to renewable energy, that of course can be credited, and things like that, capturing old freon gas and having it recycled as opposed to released into the environment. So there's great examples of things. We're just a nature-based solution in that we recognize that the tree used to cover the earth, and a lot of it has been removed, and that's really where we can play a part. So we're looking forward to getting going, and of course we have a website that Martin has referenced, and we're happy to continue the dialogue with anyone who's curious about what we're doing. And we're very proud to be working with such great people. And really focusing on sustainability. And I think, to Gaston's point, there is a new economy coming, and that we
Just
can't
in time.
Yeah, oh, exactly. And we can't avoid putting money back into the forest. It's a real problem. And that we need money from high quality credit sales to put back into the forest to make sure that they're there, to create biodiversity, to make sure that ungulate populations can thrive, that small mammals have cover and shade for streams and fish and all the things that we value, clean water. And, as we're thinking about what Gaston was saying when he opened up, it's poetry. The forest is poetry, and it's poetry in our lives. And if we can continue to harvest that and use that to clean the air in a very natural way, then we've really succeeded.
Excellent. Now, I was a French lit major, so you can help me with this ungulate thing. It seems to me that might be a cow or a deer. What exactly are we talking about? Ungulates.
Deer.
Okay, that's what I
deer,
figured.
elk,
It was some
caribou,
kind of
moose,
yeah,
those types of animals. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
For forestry lingo, I apologize. We talk about ungulate wintering range, and
but I did get it right. I'd like to point out that I just took a stab at it. I had some idea, but that should get me some credit with somebody. Well, merci bien. So, thank you, everyone. What a Earth Day this has been. Oh, look, am I off camera? Anyway, oh no, there I am. So, thank you very much, and I'd just like to tell all the attendees, we will make sure that everybody has a link to CarbonConnect's website, and maybe we can get a bibliography from Jacques as far as everyone that people should can look at, maybe to learn more about these great men in science. And from on behalf of the Boivin Center, merci bien pour les efforts, pour le travail. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you and meet with you, and I hope we can do this again soon.
And Michael, it's my second experience with all the people of your Boivin Center and UMass. And, it demonstrates that the collaboration between our two countries are very, very, very interesting. C'est une richesse que nous avons, cette collaboration entre nos deux pays. So thank you very much for what you've done for the Earth.
Et voilà.
Voilà. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very
Wow.
much.
Anne, merci beaucoup.
Merci, avec plaisir.
And
Au
thank
revoir.
you, Michael.
Voilà.
Thank you. Thanks for
Bonne
everybody.
nuit. Thank you. Bye-bye.